Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Ray, and welcome to the RayWenderlich.com podcast. In this podcast, we'll keep you up to date with the latest app development tech talk. Now, here are your hosts, Drew Freeman and Susanna Skyer-Gupta.
Thanks, Ray. This is the RayWenderlich.com podcast. Welcome to episode 12 for season 12. This episode was recorded on Tuesday, the 12th of April, 2022. This episode is for release on the 20th of April, 2022. I am Susanna Skyer-Gupta with our show host, Drew Freeman.
Thanks, Suze. This episode is sponsored by Perseverance, whether that's continuing to produce a podcast just because you love it in the community, or continuing to develop a personal app even when it's super hard to find the time for a passion project. We also continue to stand in awe, and we stand in awe of and with the people of Ukraine. And you can continue to find hashtag Stand With Ukraine resources in the show notes. Susanna?
Thanks, Drew. Today's episode, the last normal episode of this season, is where we at last get to turn the microphone toward our intrepid podcast host, Drew. We'll be learning all about what he's been learning in his side gig as an indie iOS dev. But first, let me tell you a bit more about him. In addition to being a 6-season host of this podcast, Drew is a full-time professional iOS developer of over 35 years. Starting on the Apple platform and working through the Macintosh and the iPhone, Drew has been a dedicated Apple third-party developer. Drew, welcome to the show.
Oh, those are just so frightening words when it's said to you. I don't know how normal this episode is going to be, but let's see where it takes us.
I am super looking forward to this episode. I started this whole gig because I thought you were fun to chat with. And I love chatting about apps and talking to indie developers and what brought them to indie development. So I think maybe before we even talk about the current app, which we're going to do lots of, and we're definitely going to use this as a platform so everybody can download that app and will be prominently placed in the show notes. Tell me about indie development and how you got started on what else, because this is not the app that we're talking about primarily today is not the only thing you have currently in the App Store. So tell me about your experience as an indie.
It's interesting because there are so many indies out there who would not consider me an indie developer. I have worked for company after company, churning out apps for them, and never tried to make this until now hopefully something that would support me.
Okay. Interesting. You're leaping ahead to another big question. Okay, so that's very exciting. So God willing, the current app will become a sustaining, like pays the mortgage kind of thing.
Yeah, that's the general plan. That's why there's been so much more effort put into a business facade around this. I don't want to call it facade, a business lattice as well. You know, it's not just a question of I want to eke out 35 cents a month out of the App Store. I actually have other plans to have it generate more income.
Well, that's definitely really exciting. So tell me about though. So I see 3 apps total in the App Store for you. So there's also, in addition to Pagan Almanac, which is the one we're really going to be exploring in detail in this episode, which has just a beautiful icon. Just say the icon itself is compelling. But there's also another app that I think is in a similar space. I don't know because I'm not well familiar with the space, called The Law is for All. And then there's also a utility called Floating Dates. Tell me about those.
Okay, so the original app, Laws for All, was for a very limited audience that had a very select amount of philosophical and, for lack of a better term, occult reading area that they would follow. And originally I wrote this because I wanted to have an app that would fulfill a specific need of mine. My wife and I always argue over the time of birth of our son because we want to have the perfect astrological chart for him. And
Right.
and I argue that it was one time, and she argues it's another. And I was like, I'm closer to the clock. You were a little busy.
So
And that
you're literally splitting by minutes or minutes and seconds, but it's relevant on the
there's 1
chart.
second
Okay.
difference.
Okay.
But it came down to the fact that all I really wanted to do was to press a button on my watch, have it capture the time, and then go make an astrological chart.
Okay.
So what I really wanted to do was just have a way to trigger something on my watch. And that was sort of the birth of this thing. But it began to evolve. And this was back in 2015. And I think the interesting thing was that I was writing this for myself. I wasn't writing it for anybody else. It wasn't an Indy App. I figured, maybe if I put a couple of other things in there that I used in my general practices, that it would be good for others, who were on the same path. But I didn't know, and I really didn't care, and that seems rather selfish at the time. But I started building this thing, and it pretty much grew organically, one out of the need to make this little watch app, which, full disclosure, that feature never got finished. And secondarily, I was a little behind on the Swift train.
Okay.
So I figured I'm going to do this app entirely in Swift.
Okay. So there's no Objective-C in the Laws for All?
I'm pretty sure there isn't. There is some C, because there was a library that I had to actually obtain and build myself for the Apple platform. It was not available for the Apple platform. It was available for Windows. It was available for a few other platforms. And I actually took this monolithic C library and converted it, which is it's a meaty one too, because it's the Jet Propulsion Library's full ephemeris of the planets that's used by NASA or other agencies to project where are planets in the sky at what time.
So does this app do charts?
It does not do charts, and I can explain why it doesn't do charts, but it does do projections of where the sun, the moon, and the planets are.
Okay.
In live time, because it's doing those computations on the device.
Okay. That sounds intense.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you exactly where the sun or the moon is in the sky because it's going and looking on the chart, and it's doing it, and I actually do a graphic which illustrates the 12 signs of the zodiac and where the planets would be drawn at that specific moment. And the iPhone is great because it has enough computational power that, I'm not really throwing around DNA here. I'm just throwing around 9 planets. Count them, 9 planets. Yes, I'm one of those people. But the reason that it doesn't do full charts is to get a chart, I need to know when and where somebody was born.
Right.
And I don't want to capture personal information at this time.
Oh, okay. I see right away. I'm just to clarify, this time we're talking about the Laws for All, or are we already
Laws for All at this point?
Okay.
One of the features that Laws for All has is that it also tells you when sun up and sundown are, and that's a feature I'd like to bring across to Pagan Almanac. But one of the things about Laws for All, and it's not the first app that got released. One of the things I was doing is I was putting together a calendar which had those dates that float, like Easter and Ramadan and Passover. Those dates float. And I basically was trying to put together an algorithm and a series of things to make that work in Laws for All. And I got to this point where I realized I've done a mock-up proof of concept to understand these floating dates, and it basically is publishable.
Okay, and so that's where the other app came out of it.
So floating dates was really just a proof of concept to make floating dates work inside my application.
Good for you, though, for releasing it.
Yeah, but so when I always tell people, it's like, well, this was my first big app. It's like, it was my first big app. Well, my first app was Floating Dates, which is unfortunately it's hard coded with a lot of years in it. So I may have to go back and check to see that it's still got all the information it needs to show what it does. It's really just a throwaway app to show you here's the date of this holiday.
In year in the future, year in the past,
Year in the future, year in the
or
past.
now.
But um Laws for All was also very stylized in a very gothic style of black and red, and to make it really dark and ominous looking. And one of the
Kind
complaints I
of
got
is
from it
that
was,
way.
hmm?
It kind of is that way. It's interesting when you look on your developer page, like the bright green labyrinth logo of Pagan Almanac to me looks, and perhaps it's because I was a beta tester too, so I've looked at it for a while, so it's familiar to me, but it looks inviting. And then Laws for All looks, I don't know, a little scary maybe. I'm not sure what I'm looking at. So,
Like I said, it was designed for a very limited audience. But one of the things that I discovered was that by making it completely dark, black, and red, I couldn't actually do things like night mode, day mode. I
oh,
couldn't.
okay.
My accessibility was a little limited because red on black isn't necessarily the clearest thing to read. I had thought about doing a Pagan Almanac version of the app, but really, I never put a lot of mind into how I was going to do it until I started white labeling Laws for All. And to
Interesting.
throw a term around, white labeling is effectively when you make something as generic as possible, so it doesn't have an audience or a theme. It just simply is the inner workings.
Right. And then different companies can use that how it makes sense for
They can
them.
go brand it on their own.
Right.
But
And
as
also, I want to just back up and underscore what
okay,
you said before because it's a really important point, which is when you're thinking about your icon and when you're thinking about the design of your choice of colors within your app, you've got to be thinking light mode, dark mode, and accessibility.
mhm.
All the time, you've got to be thinking accessibility. So read up on that first before you pick your colors.
I really I wasn't when I did Laws for All. Interestingly enough, I was reading up on on globalization and internationalization, and parts of Laws for All actually, if you open it in French, it'll open in French. Lots of Google Translate, so don't hold us responsible for that. But as I began to white label Laws for All, it began to sort of blossom and bloom into where I could see how I could make this a better fit for a wider audience.
Okay, so this is very much a story that continues. So Laws for All is the start of the story, and here we are much further down the path, 7 years down the path, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So tell us about what Pagan Almanac is and who's it for.
Okay, I like to refer to it as a Swiss Army athame. And athame is a neo pagan term for a ritual knife.
Okay.
So by calling it the Swiss Army athame, I sort of it's a tongue-in-cheek reference to being your bladed weapon that you can use, and it's really meant to be. One of the things that I discovered in looking at pagan applications is they fell into predominantly um, divination applications, which are, what's my daily fortune? What's my fortune number? What's a one card tarot read? Tell me something about my life. Or maybe it would go so far as to do my astrological chart. But none of them actually taught a lot. And matter of fact, many of them, if you read the blurbs on the apps, would say this comes from my 30 years, my 40 years, my 50 years in the path of the masters that I have studied with. And I was like, you know, I can say I've been in this thing for 30 years, but that doesn't help you. It just presents
Interesting.
you an app, and it supposedly gives me street cred. And I figured the most important street cred would be if I built an app, you should be able to learn from this app. So I decided I was going to put all of my reference materials into the app. As programmers, we're often told, if we use a third-party library, we should credit that third-party library. And as a
Absolutely.
programmer, I've always been ashamed at how many programmers don't credit their third-party libraries.
Right. And I'm pretty sure that if you are somebody out there not doing that, that you're violating the license agreement of that library.
Yeah, yeah, and
So,
just somewhere I would love to see the Facebook app third-party library list. Just for my thing. So, when I did Laws for All, I did a third-party library list, and I was like, why stop there? Why not put all of my references? So I put every book that I studied. And as I did different things for these apps, if I was studying the I Ching, I went out and I bought books on the I Ching. If I was studying tarot, I bought books on the tarot. And let me tell you, the last book you'll ever need on astrology was one of 7 books on astrology. So with all due respect to that book, it just
really
was not the last
pleasing.
book I ever needed.
Looking in the references section, first of all, I just love references and read, like in any book, I love reading the bibliography. Like it's just so pleasing to me. And I've also got to call out the very subtle pale green highlighting behind references when I tap it. Ooh, I love that too. So this is a wonderful thing that you have this in the app. So I'd like to step back and define terms a little bit because I don't come from an understanding of what pagan is, what that means. And then when you were explaining how you notice that many of the other apps in the App Store that presumably come up when you search pagan are divination apps. So tell me what pagan means, and tell me also what divination means.
Okay, so paganism is at its coarsest definition, pagan is a non-traditional religious path. But neo-paganism has come to represent a return to a lot of the Celtic, Norse, and other earth-based religions that at that time predated Christianity and Catholicism, or predated, Judeo-Christian followings. Though it's interesting, if you take a look at a lot of the Jewish holidays, they fall in line with nature and the wheel of the year.
Right.
So paganism is
Right.
the growing
Absolutely.
the growing following of this. I have to use the term neo-paganism because it is really not that old. I mean, there are generations of authors who've been doing stuff along these lines and writing stuff, but it's relatively fresh. But that doesn't mean it's any less respectable, especially for the people who are taking that on as a practice.
Pagan versus Wiccan. What's the difference?
That's a question I would love to answer, but by answering it, I would get myself into possibly a holy war, as that definition is very, very amorphous, and I think on some levels very personal. I could be completely wrong on that statement there as well, but Wicca tends to be a branch of paganism.
Okay. I need to ask only because when you search in the App Store, you get some Wiccan results coming up too. So
yeah. Now the other word you asked me about was divination. And divination is a practice. Now, I basically say that my audience for this app are pagans, Wiccans, and witches. And yes, there are people who very gladly embrace the term witch nowadays. But what divination is a practice of effectively trying to predict or tell a story from symbols. Tarot is the most popular, where you will deal out cards and tell a story, and maybe that story will attune with the person who is asking the question.
Right. I never thought of that. I didn't really realize that was something related to paganism, but as you start to explain things,
Hmm.
it makes sense because just doing that must go back to this earlier time,
Hmm. Well, the tarot
these
cards
earlier
themselves go
practices.
back fairly far. Well, depending on what iteration of cards you're going through.
So, how'd you come up with the app idea in the first place? It was from doing the other app? Like,
So I
tell me
had
about your process. And I'm going to want to really get into the nitty-gritty of market research on this too.
okay, so I was doing Laws for All for a very limited audience, and I came to the conclusion that there was no way I could really grow that app or make it something that would continue to organically grow. It would just be out there and not really gain a lot more material. And one of the things that I don't like on the App Store are apps that have been out there for 5 or 7 years and have not changed in 3 or 4.
Yeah, I agree. I
I like to
agree.
see some sense of growth. I like to see some sense of I want to stay committed to this app. I like it. It adds new features.
And in
And
fact, Apple tells us they will kick us out if we don't update it over a lengthy period of time. But that seems to vary according, like, even among small slash indie devs, it seems to vary whether they really do kick you out when they say they're going to.
I know not of the ways of Apple. I simply
Yes, that would
and
be
we'll get
handy
to
to
that
have
as well.
divination related to that.
We'll get to that as well. Um, yeah, so as I began to work on Pagan Almanac, I realized that I had something that could not merely educate and help pagans who were trying to learn or have reference material. I realized it was something that I could continually contribute to and grow. For example, one of the things that I have in there is a dictionary of crystals and minerals.
Hmm.
And I currently have about 40 in there. If you go into any good Bible of minerals, you'll find out that there are 40,000 minerals. I have not even begun to scratch the diamond surface. But one
So,
of the things I
so
wanted to
there's,
do, go ahead.
I was going to say, so there's definitely, so looking in, I have so many questions about terms. So looking in the grimoire, which is where I find this crystal dictionary. Okay. So is everything under here an area that then will expand and expand and expand over time?
Well, if you select one of the crystals at random, I don't know which one you're going to pick. Please show it to
Okay.
the
I'm
people
going
at
to,
home.
yes.
Yeah.
So also, guys, you
So,
should get this out because it's so pretty and there's so much in it. So I picked amethyst because that's my birthstone.
okay, and you'll notice that one of the things it says in there is whether or not it amplifies or absorbs energy, which is
Yeah.
relevant to somebody who is working with meditating, or if they say they're having problems with something. What else does it say under amethyst?
It says its color, which is violet to deep purple, and then it says it's chakras, like that it's got a crown chakra and a third eye chakra, and that it's used for intuition, balance, and a higher wisdom.
Hmm. So let's say you're trying to sharpen your intuitism, your intuism. I can't speak today.
Your intuition.
You're trying to sharpen your intuition. Um, you can actually edit that if it absorbs energy or if it amplifies energy. You can actually scratch it out on the page and write in what you think because it's
Interesting.
designed to give you a starting block. But if you find out that something doesn't resonate with you the same way, who am I to tell you that you're wrong? So what I
Okay.
wanted to do was make it so that at least initially with the crystals, that if you felt differently, you can actually edit the dictionary page. You can
Yes, and I
change the
noticed that
shoppers. You can
because
change the energy. And I'm still working on the changing the definitions.
that's
And
cool.
it leaves what's there. It basically puts green pencil mark through it and puts your corrections in there. So this was a
So
way
you'll
that
be able to go back and see like, oh, this is definitely edited. Here's what the original material was,
exactly.
in case in case you change your mind about that. Okay, so here's another coming from outside the world of paganism, question on terms. What's a grimoire?
A grimoire is really just a library of magical books.
Okay.
And there's two sets of magical books in there. There's the encyclopedia, which is all the gathered information you can reference. And then there's a couple of other books that are things like rituals or instructions. And
Yeah,
I
there's
hope
a
to add to
lot
both
in
of
here.
those.
Okay. So what did you learn in terms of looking at who your competitors are? How'd you do that? What'd you learn? How'd you change your app based on that?
Well, it wasn't that I much changed my app. The more I looked into a lot of these apps, a lot of them were very much, I'm going to spoon feed you magical information. And that was something that I found myself not wanting. I realize there's an audience for it. There are tons of apps specifically for that. But I wanted an app that was at its core educational.
Like something that's really different about this app is it's more of a study companion.
Mhm.
So in that you can change it and, preserve what's being spoon fed, okay, but then you can also digest and enter your own information alongside.
And one of the things that I did as far as the tarot is concerned, I could very easily have just said, here is a tarot interpretation of a card. This card means this. Not everybody might agree on that. So I went out and I found 4 different tarot interpreters from around the world to give different interpretations. And that way you can choose one that, again, resonates with you. If you find something that you enjoy reading more, or if it seems that whenever that card comes up, that person's thing seems to make the most sense, that can happen.
Let's step back here a little bit so people working in a different um, interest stream, but also Ray an app can use this, can learn from this. So how'd you come across these competitors? What did you do? And then,
Well, I made a spreadsheet because who wouldn't want to make a spreadsheet?
of
And
course,
I basically went looking through pagan apps at ones that had lots and lots of reviews.
right.
I mean,
Okay.
there are ones out there that have 12,000 reviews, and
Wow. Okay. So
I
that shows you something about the
dream.
market.
Yes, I dream of being able to capture that many people. Um,
Yeah, that's a lot of
and
people.
capture people is not the right term either. I really want to share rather than capture, and I'll talk more about that later when we talk about how this thing is going to grow. Um, I looked at the different apps and I sort of described, well, what do they do?
Mhm.
And what ranking do they have? And I tried to figure out how do they make their own money, or do they even bother? Because a
Right.
lot of these apps, you have to figure not everyone is a pagan programmer. Now, I'll
Okay.
admit
Right.
a
Who's
lot more.
writing the apps? Right.
Yeah, I'll admit there are a lot more of us in programming that are pagan than you would probably shake a stick at. But not every one of those apps. Some of those apps had to basically be churned out by someone who said, here, let's make one of these apps and see if we can make money out of it. And I
Right.
feel
For
badly
sure.
about it because I'm not out to drain my audience. I'm not out to do that. I'm out to grow a community.
I
Um,
think that's definitely a point that's worth making. Like, I don't think it's terrible to to make an app just to make money. I don't think that's a terrible thing. But if you are not a member of a community to just see how you can profit off the community,
Yeah.
that doesn't feel good.
Well, I mean, monetizing somebody else's culture is unfortunately something that's out there, and it's difficult, and I wish it wasn't happening.
Yeah, but it sounds like in the world of paganism, there's cultural appropriation just like there is everywhere, right? So, okay, so you looked for the highest rated, like most number of ratings apps in the store.
I
And
looked for
then
a
they
couple that
made it
had
into your
I looked for a couple that had very little rating as well.
Yeah, okay, because that's worth learning from too. And then you made your spreadsheet and you downloaded them and you played with them. And perhaps you looked at their reviews and saw what people were, if you had like, that's really, I know from my experience working in app marketing, that's so valuable if you can look at what people are and aren't saying in your competition's reviews, like things they wish your competition had. That's golden.
Yeah, I wish I could believe all the reviews that I read, but I've been in too many large scale companies that have talked about review farms.
Yes. Yes.
And
That is definitely a thing.
I've actually left. I left one company because when they mentioned that they were going to go through a review farm, I basically said, I cannot in good conscience work on this app anymore.
Right.
Predominantly because it's gaming the system, it's breaking the policies, and I don't need that to follow me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for those who don't understand
agree.
what review farms are, there are actually companies out there that you spend money on, and they will put reviews from different IP addresses down on an app. And sometimes they'll leave bad reviews on competing apps.
Right. Right. I think we think of it maybe more in context of like Amazon and online shopping, but yeah, it's a thing with apps also. So, okay, so you got the idea. You did your market research. Who did you talk to about it? And are you like, is Pagan Almanac just you, or are there backers?
I always love to talk about Pagan Almanac in a we, because it could just be that I'm psychotic and there are multiple voices in my head. but we have been the programmer for the past 7 years, and it's really been my brainchild. But I mean, my spouse is Pagan. I'm blessed that my in-laws are also Pagan.
Wow.
So that whole concept of, well, how do you come out to your in-laws? It's like, they're there. So I was able to get some advice from them. I know many people in the community. I was able to get advice there as well. The hardest part is that I'm an iPhone developer, not an Android developer. And most of the people that I know are Android owners. So I would have to basically
interesting.
show them the work I was doing on my phone. And many of them have said, hey, as soon as ... But I got a lot of good feedback. I ran a fairly long beta test with people from the community and got a lot of really good feedback. So, but it really
Talk about
was
the mechanics of actually running the beta test.
Well, the beta test.
When you decide to put your app in beta, like how'd you know? And then what'd you actually do?
Amusingly, I kept saying that I was going to release the app at Beltane, which for some reason I'd gotten confused in my head with Ostara, and I'll explain those two terms. Beltane is the spring ritual of birth and rebirth and all of that. It's May 1st, but I had thought that Ostara, Easter, is the spring equinox. I meant to release on the spring equinox. So I decided that if I'm going to release on the spring equinox, I have to work my calendar and my schedule appropriately. See, I played a game called Agile for One, meaning that I was my business analyst, I was my product analyst, I was my programmer, I
You're
was my
your
scrum
scrum master.
master, and I still sign things, lordandre.com / wearer of many hats. But the whole idea was by doing Agile for One, I actually had sprints where I'd say these features will come out during this time period. And I want to be feature complete and code locked by this date.
That was useful to you at working as a solo developer to do it that way on your
Right,
personal
because
project. Like it helped you stay on track.
If you're the guy who's creating the features and the person programming it, you're never getting done because there's
Yeah.
always one more feature.
Oh, yeah.
And I had to actually, I drew the line in the sand or on my back, on my on on Jira, and basically said, "Here, that's the stuff that we're not doing for the first release."
Right. Good. Good. Okay. And so then you could see where the beta would be.
hmm
Okay.
And as a beta
So,
tester yourself of the app, you saw that there were certain features that weren't done early on and got added.
right. And it was actually one of the things that I thought was really good about what you did in the beta test process is your communication as to what was there, what wasn't, and what to test was good.
hmm Yeah, I got wonderful bugs sent back. I would say I actually alpha tested as well as beta tested because I was not even sure what all my features were when I started asking people to play with it.
Right. And that was useful, right?
Absolutely. The more feedback I got, the more I knew what to do with it.
So the whole minimum viable product get out there soon and let people start telling you what they really want from it and how they're really using it.
I hate minimal viable product. I want my product to be more than just minimally viable.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So, okay. Talk to me about testing beyond you've talked about the development scheduling, okay, which is it's wonderful to hear as somebody who loves scheduling, that you use Jira and you had like the backlog and the sprints and just like you would on a multi-person project. Um, Tell me about testing and to what extent was that like what you would do in a multi-person project, and to what extent maybe not so much?
There are a couple of files that have unit tests. I wish there were more that had unit tests. I've seen my code coverage. My code coverage is good, but my unit tests are weak. Again, a lot of this was challenging myself to do things, challenging myself to learn Swift, challenging myself to do watch components. And I'm sorry, there are no watch components in Pagan Almanac.
Yeah, I was just about to ask that. To what extent
No,
is this available on Watch?
I haven't put anything there because I haven't figured out what I want to put on the watch yet. And
Okay, so
we did the talk with the watch folks this year, and I sat there after that episode going, what can I do? And I couldn't figure it out. So I wasn't like, I'm not going to just force something in there. Everything that I put in that app is in there for a reason. It solves a problem for me somewhere.
I wonder if it would be fun to do just like, I don't know, a series of notifications or a series of like I don't know, interesting thing of the day from the vast amount of reference material that is in that app that shows up on your watch.
That's actually one of the last features that I put into the app was a news pull notification.
Okay.
It doesn't have push notifications. It basically when the app logs in, it goes over to the server and says, "Is there a news story?" And if so, it displays it.
Yeah, I
And
saw that actually when I opened it.
And I haven't put a new news story up in a little while because I'm just waiting for the initial rush. And right now I'm in the midst of the business part of things, as there's a whole lot more there. But yeah, I do have that news blurb that I can put out.
Yeah, and I was thinking maybe deep linking into like, here's a crystal and here's how this works and here's how you might use it in your life. Although then that starts becoming way more than I imagine you'd want on your watch.
I don't have
I don't know
yet
because I don't have a watch, but
should
I acquire one, I would want to test. I would be interested to test the watch version of your app that I think we've just decided is coming in the future.
So
you had mentioned, as we're talking, the business side of things. And I happen to know, because we hang out with some frequency in the course of doing this podcast, that you recently had a business plan put together. You put together a business plan. Talk more about this. What does the business side of things mean? What is a business plan for an app? And
I knew that if I was going to go to anyone to invest in this app for any reason, I needed it to be more than this is my pet project. I mean, you can only go to your relatives so many times with pet projects without it actually seeming like you're actually doing something of value. And partially, I realized as I was building this thing, I need to have an Android port. And that's going to cost me money. So I said, I have got to look at this from a business point of view, and I have got to do it. And I went to the website Fiverr, which is where I got a person who did an elementary business plan for me. It's also where I got two of my, believe it or not, astrological tarot readers. Fiverr's a really good site. Matter of fact, when I had some code issues in the app, I went to Fiverr. But I also have been tracking the amount of money that has gone into Fiverr this year, because that's money out of pocket specifically for this app. And that's where all of a sudden you're making very involved spreadsheets, because you really have to know where is the money going and why is the money going? Where is all the rum? It's essential. And once I did that, then the next step was to go to LegalZoom, which, don't let anyone tell you have to go to LegalZoom. I just did it because I didn't have the time to go through all the papers on my own. I spent a little extra money going to LegalZoom to have them actually turn me into an LLC. And the only reason I'm an LLC is not that I'm trying to make this a corporate app, but so that I'm trying to basically say, I want to keep in a line all the ducks that have to do with the app. And I want to be able to put on my hat and say, I'm working on the app now. And I want to be able to take that hat off and say, well, sink or swim, we're going to just keep trying.
Okay. Say more. Why? So what about this made you decide to make an LLC for this, and as opposed to earlier? When should somebody make an LLC and why? And aren't there a couple other structures that you could
There are many different types of corporate structures, but the whole thing was that with an LLC, you can be a sole proprietor LLC.
Okay.
Meaning that it's really just a way to separate your personal funds from your business funds. Okay. Even though at any time you can go, well, I'm funding the business some more.
Right. But if somebody were to sue the business, for example, being an LLC protects your personal funds?
Yeah, that's sort of the hope there.
Okay. And tell me what LegalZoom is.
LegalZoom is a website that basically puts together all of the paperwork for your state, and it makes sure that everything gets filed correctly. But I will tell you that any estimate you get on how long something like this will take about 50% longer than your original estimate, because right now, due to COVID, a lot of your state-based corporate evaluation entity things are really behind in processing paperwork.
Oh, right. Okay. And I'm sure also we should apologize. A lot of this is going to be very US specific, and
Oh yeah,
what
yeah.
and how you do is something you've got to figure out in
And in
own
all
country.
honesty, they'll tell you this, and they're probably right, and that is consult a lawyer first. Talk to a lawyer. That costs money too, but the lawyer will help you get figured out on what you're trying to do. Get an accountant. That's something I'm currently trying to do, is find an accountant to make sure that the money is all in the right place.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a judgment call and
It's
a difficult one. When is the time to start doing this stuff? You know, like I would be tempted to wait to lean into the marketing and get to like set myself some kind of goal, like I'm bringing in X amount monthly on this app. Now I should get an
and there are some that
accountant.
will say that I have put the cart before the horse, specifically because right now, earnings wise, we just released and
Right.
we have in-app purchases and not a lot of people are purchasing. But due to the planned growth, and I'll be happy to talk about that, um, there's a hopeful feeling that this thing can grow in a way that we can make it much bigger and much more of a better resource without ever having to introduce advertising into the app.
Good. Yes. Yes. Because that kind of cuts against the this is a great study resource that you
Mhm.
want to, grow with and consult all the time if there are
I never want to see pay 99
ads are a bit
cents to
icky.
remove ads. I never want to see that.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've mentioned planned growth and how the app is going to grow more than once in today's conversation. Say
Mhm.
more about it. How is the app going to grow?
So revenue streams are your bread and butter. That is, where is your money coming from? And there were a couple of in-app purchases in the app.
Right.
However, most people want a free app that they can use, and if they like it, they'll keep using it. If they don't like it, they will stop using it. And not everybody buys the in-app purchases unless it's something that gets in
Right.
their way of enjoying the app. One of the things I did was I made the encyclopedia 7-day free so that you can
Mhm.
look at the crystals and the tarot and the I Ching and all of that stuff. And I also said, if you get the encyclopedia as a whole, if I build another book of the encyclopedia, you'll get that for free. If you buy one of the dictionaries, you'll get any enhancements to that dictionary for free. Um, One of the things that I put in the app, and we haven't talked about it, is tarot, where you can
Right.
actually do a tarot reading. And you
Oh,
can, unlike any other app that I found, you can actually put the cards down on the table wherever you want.
fascinating because and I think part of it is that I'm outside the target audience of pagans, Wiccans, and witches. So to me, like what you're saying with tarot and also the research you did, like where I think you were saying that you found on Fiverr like 4 different tarot people.
Mhm.
Um, this is like that right there seems like it could be its whole own, maybe best in class app. And then there's
I'd
so
love
much
to think
that's
so.
one part of the app, and then there's so much more to
Mhm.
the app.
So
So that was really intriguing to me.
part of the tarot has an in-app purchase, which I really would appreciate people considering, because that is where a lot of the money went in just creating the
Yeah.
app. But the in-app purchases are really only one of our revenue streams. Um, that bibliography that has all of the references in it have links
Oh,
to Amazon. And if you find any of the
okay.
books in the app interesting and you buy it on Amazon, I get a couple of cents.
And isn't there another aspect of that area that is also a revenue stream? Because can't you, as a local business that markets to this community, choose to be listed within the app, and then
That is
presumably
something else that I'm currently building up, is that
so it's like an affiliate program, yeah?
there's an affiliate program for the app. I am actually looking at it as two-tier, which is I'm willing to put any occult reference into the app, any cult, store, coven, community, for free. But then to actually have a reviewed, or a basically a stamped one that says we keep in contact with them, and we know that they are open, and we know that they are good, and for that you pay a couple of bucks a month, and it gives you sort of elevated status.
And on your end, you're really doing that, right? You really
Yeah,
are keeping in
we actually want
contact
to
and
make sure that,
saying,
because there's nothing worse than looking at a reference for an app and then it's dead. Nothing worse than
right.
going to a website and it's dead. I actually pulled one of my links right at launch day because the link was dead.
And I'm thinking, like, if some of these are actual physical businesses, something that could be really fun to do if you're part of this customer group is, like, as you travel, okay, so let's see what's in Pagan Almanac. Is there something by where we're traveling that we can
Exactly.
go
That's one
visit?
of the things that I want to be able to do, is I want somebody to be able to say, I'm in town, let me search and let me get something better than just Yelp tells me that this has 4 stars.
Right. And that goes back to, you're a member of this community making this for the community.
Right.
So references that you vouch for are meaningful because of that trust relationship, because you're part of the community.
And then on the side, we also have Patreon.
Yes. Okay. Talk about Patreon. What is your experience through Pagan Almanac the first time you've worked with Patreon?
Actually, so I actually did a Kickstarter for Laws for All way back when I purchased that complex third-party library for commercial
Right.
usage. I had Patreon up for Laws for All for a little while, predominantly because I didn't like the idea of soliciting donations inside the app through in-app purchases.
Right. Okay.
It didn't feel right. But Laws for All, like I said, was a very limited audience, and I didn't really feel like its growth was there. But with Pagan Almanac, it allows me to be closer to people who are really invested in or interested in the app. I get to make blog posts on a regular basis.
I'm gonna say, I feel like you really do that. Like, your communication is great. Like, it's happening. It's interesting. Because I'm on the Patreon list, and yeah, I read those, and they're pretty frequent. So that's really cool. What are they like to work with? Like, first of all, what percentage are they taking? And what monetary relationship do you have with Patreon? How do they make money?
Patreon pretty much makes money the same way that Apple makes money, and that is that they take a little off the top.
Right. Okay. But it feels fair.
If I have a $25 Patreon, I see about $23 and some odd cents.
Yeah. Okay. So that makes
Patreon
sense.
also has swag, and I like their swag. We have a mug that has the icon. We have a bag that has the icon.
So if you're setting up a Patreon for your own app, you upload your icon, and then you can pick what swag it appears on. Like, they've got all that. You don't need to find.
Well, they have a small selection of swag.
Okay.
But I mean, if you want to go crazy with swag, and I said, if you're in $100 tier, I'll make you a little acrylic button with the icon on it. So,
and you're doing that at home with a button maker, yeah? Like, I'm
going online to a company that does that.
Okay.
They make really good buttons.
So do you feel like the Patreon's working out for you? Are you comfortable sharing like how many people you have on it and how like
4.
okay, so guys, you need to look, you need to sign up for that Patreon. If you're listening, sign up for the Patreon.
Well, and that's one of the things I did was I put in the info section, the info about the app will tell you that you can go to our Facebook page, or you can go to our Patreon page, you can go to the app page, and I'm really trying not to advertise, and I'm trying not to push advertisement in people's faces.
Okay, that being said though, funny you should
Yeah.
mention that because
Okay.
I was looking in the App Store, and as somebody who has worked in app marketing, I was like, would you look at that? You come up first in sponsored results on the keyword pagan for me.
Oh,
So,
I don't for me.
oh, interesting. Okay. So you are running search ads.
I'm running search ads, and I actually
Talk about
have.
that.
Search ads are rather interesting because I don't have a huge SEO experience, and budget wise, it's like, well, how much does a unit cost? And it's like, well, that's a good
Right.
question. And how much do you wish to spend on a unit? Um, each unit's appearance on the store, and those are a lot of ballpark numbers right now. But I put it out there so that people who are looking for pagan will find it.
Right.
I've got something like 30 SEO keywords.
Okay. Do you feel like, are you starting to see that drive downloads?
Well, the downloads have been a lot more so than I was expecting. I was expecting about 20 to 25 in March, because we started officially the launch on the 20th and wound up getting, God, was it just around 100? And
Okay.
we were already on track to
Were
be
you
at
already
500.
running ads, or was that like before? No. Okay. That was like the soft launch before any
No,
advertising.
and
Yeah.
I did have one person who is one store that's been working with me, who was a one of the readers on the tarot, do a special Ostara deal saying, if you download the app, well, I'll give you an entry into this giveaway I'm doing. And it was very good,
Oh,
because it was
cool.
like somebody was able to do something hand in hand with me for the launch, and that helped.
Okay. So, all right. So that's another way you're marketing is
Mhm.
influencer marketing.
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah,
So you're doing the search ads, you're doing influencer marketing, you're doing word of mouth.
I hope to be on I hope to be a sponsorship on a podcast for witches.
Okay,
But
cool.
right now everything's in hold, because right now I am currently, like I said, the reason I went into the business mode on this thing is that I want an Android version, and an Android version costs money. And I'm currently
Right.
waiting to do contracts with the Android team. Once I am able to do contracts with the Android team, I know what my operating budget for the next quarter and a half are.
So you have an Android team, you're just in the process of signing the contracts?
I have an Android team that I believe I'm going to be working with, and I'm just waiting for them to come up with what they believe the estimates and the work is going to be.
Okay, so how'd you find the Android team? Is that also Fiverr?
No, that was a site called, I think, Bark, which puts out business. I'm looking for a business that can do X.
Okay.
And that
And
can be
so,
anything from, I'm looking for a handyman, to I am looking for a contractor to do a new room in the house.
and yours was, I have an iOS app written in Swift and I'm looking for somebody to convert it to Android.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then how do you know your Android team's going to be good?
I spent most of January and February basically bidding them, where
Okay.
I went back and forth with about 8 companies.
Wow. That's a lot of work.
Yeah. That's why there was, again, that's why I had my launch date set and my feature date set and everything else. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to run it like a business so that, I can turn around and basically say, look, we've dotted our I's and we've crossed our T's.
So, where are you going to go with the business plan? Who gets approached?
Well, you pray that you have some pseudo deep pockets, either in family or in friends. You show them the plans. You make it seem reasonable enough that they understand that it's an investment. It may go,
Right.
but the business plan is there to show this is how I see us growing in different ways. And this is, the effort it will take to do that.
Right. Well, that's exciting. And my gosh, what a massive amount of learning on so many different fronts. This
Mhm.
has to have been / be for you.
Oh yeah,
There's
I'm sitting on operating agreements that I barely comprehend because of the business ease.
yeah, there's a lot to this. For the indie app developer who's choosing to go all in, to
Mhm.
want to make this really your income.
Mhm.
I think there's a different path where you can be like, oh, let's see what I can build and let's just put it in the store and see what happens, and that's an easier path, but less likely to lead towards revenue, I think.
What can I say to the indie developer who wants to go all in? Don't quit your day job.
Yes.
Only one in a whole bucket of companies prospers. And you put everything into it that you can, but you have to expect at the end of the day, this is not necessarily, if it turns the corner, then yay.
And of course, you'll
But
still be here at Ray Wenderlich, even when it turns the corner.
oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just clarifying. Good. Maybe
No.
not in your other gigs, but. So I want to look through our notes and make sure that there's nothing I'm missing out here that I want to ask and share with other aspiring indie developers. Okay, I do want to ask some of the big questions about, so overall, and there's plenty, you've been at this for a while with this title in particular. Looking back over all of it, okay, to now, what part has been the hardest about it?
Going back to code that is 7 years old.
So did you manage to not refactor? Did you manage to live with your older code, even though maybe you don't love it?
There is code in there that really is not in the greatest shape. And the scary part is it's around things like the in-app purchase.
That is scary.
The App Store finally went through a renaissance in the last WWDC. I think it was either last year or the year before, where they went to all of the reactive code and all of the combine and await and async, and I'll never say await. I'll always but most of my code is still very old. Now, I'll admit there's a lot of Swift UI in my code, because as I started building up Pagan Almanac's new features that are not in Laws for All, and there's a lot in Pagan Almanac that is completely new for Pagan Almanac. It's not just a re-release of Laws for All. There's, I mean, the dictionaries, the divination, it's all new material. The reference section as well. And as I sat there writing new features, I was like, well, I'm going to force myself to do Swift UI.
Yeah. But so the hardest part is just living with that, knowing the older code's in there and looking back
Yes.
at that code. And yeah. So since you released it, what surprised you?
The number of people who've been downloading it has been a pleasant surprise.
What else? Now, I did see one of the things, and we talked about this early on, and I love that you do this, and everybody should be doing this, where you credit, okay, the third-party libraries that you're using. And I was curious, like, okay, how's he doing this? So I see you're using Flurry, which is an analytics library. Tell me about what you're learning from it.
Well, I get to see, how is the app being used? With Flurry, I get to find out, are people going to a specific feature?
Okay.
And I hope to.
Are they? And which is like, are enough people finding the tarot? Like,
a lot of people are using the divination. A lot of people are using the dictionary, which
okay.
I hope the dictionary will turn around and begin to transform into people purchasing the encyclopedia. One of the things that I hope is that by having that valued business or valued coven section, that we can track who looked there, so you can say, well, how many hits are you getting?
Right.
Because it's,
and then,
I mean, that's where the money really is in being able to understand who is using the app.
Who and how they're using it.
Yeah.
And are you happy with Flurry as an analytics package to integrate?
Well, I should be shifting over to Google and all of Firebase Analytics, but I have not done a huge refactor of the app in 7 years, and that's one of the things that's coming up in the next year. Right now, I'm trying to do as little to the app as possible so the Android team isn't trying to hit a moving target.
Exactly. So the next big thing that's going to happen for Pagan Almanac is it's going to show up in the Google Play Store.
Yeah.
Should I ask you about timing?
Well, I'm hoping that I can release it on the equinox, just like I did with the first one.
Okay.
So 6 months. That's my plan. Whether or not we hit it, we don't know yet.
Well, that's exciting.
But I'm not Apple. I don't play too many cards close to my vest.
All right. What have I not asked you about this app that I should have asked you?
That is a fantastic question. Oh, we've talked about the features of the app. One of the features that I'm really happy about the app is it has a little journal so that you can actually
I like that too. When I was testing it, I like that.
So that if you're looking at a divination, you can save the divination to a journal page. If you're looking at a specific page in the dictionary, you can save that page to a journal page. You can even make journal pages that have nothing to do with the app. And they're just like, I did my own personal ritual, and this is when I did it. And it'll just keep all of the information.
Yeah, I really like, and I feel like this is a key part of the positioning, is I like how it's a study assistant. There's a lot of reference, but there's also all this room for reflection in it. Mm-hmm. And that seems like a lovely thing that one would want. So I have to ask you, I realize I didn't ask this. Is the icon also from a designer on Fiverr? Where's the icon from? Because I really think it's compelling.
It's the St. Edmund's Labyrinth.
Okay. So it's beautiful.
if you were to look up the St. Edmund's Labyrinth online, you'd come across many, many pictures of that.
Okay.
I believe
Lovely.
that since it's hundreds of years old, that it's out of copyright. I hope it is.
That sounds like something that shouldn't be within copyright, but you've disclosed what it is. So,
Yes.
So usually we start each episode talking about the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
It's so funny. Like, can we be done talking about the pandemic? I don't know. I was thinking maybe we were like totally done with all this Michigas craziness. And then, so in my cultural religious world away from the podcast, we are coming up on the holiday of Passover, which is when my little tiny family gathers together. My daughter was on a business trip to London, got COVID, had to quarantine, tested positive. She was feeling fine. And we didn't even know she'd been able to come home. But she managed to get on a plane and she's here now. So we're not done with COVID.
Mm-mm.
How is it over there? I mean, how are you feeling about COVID now? And how's COVID been in your household? And has COVID actually been in your household?
COVID has not been in my household, quote, as far as we know.
Thank God. Thank God.
And it's always, quote, as far as we know, because
right.
We could have been and not known it. As far as I know, nobody in the household has had it. I have a son who is 16 and he is 15. I'm jumping ahead. I'm not ready.
Oh, don't jump ahead in those years. Don't jump ahead.
So
hang on to 15.
Everybody in the family has been inoculated twice, had a booster. My spouse is very concerned about long COVID and has not really gone out much. I do most of the errand running in the household, but I haven't caught anything.
Goodness. I think I asked you once before, and I don't remember if I asked you this on a broadcast or in our chit chat around a broadcast, but so I read that in-person events are really, really important in the pagan community, maybe even more important within the pagan community than in certain other cultural groups. Are they back?
And it's interesting too, because there's an entire group called solitary pagans.
Okay.
Yes, there are. So they probably are doing just fine. I know that some groups are beginning to get back together again and do stuff. I mean, it really is small communities that have felt safe among each other.
Mm.
There was a lot of social responsibility among a lot of these groups. These are nature and earth-based religions, so
right.
Having some sense of nature and earth is a good thing. But, I don't have a specific coven that I'm a part of. So I can't speak for anybody locally. I know that one of the local book groups has not started meeting again yet.
Okay. So it's not back to normal.
No.
I don't even know if that phrase makes sense, like back to normal. I question both back and normal. So
yeah. I don't know if I ever really was normal, but that's just me.
Yeah, I don't like what was normal, and do we really want to go back, and could we if we want to? I'm not so sure. But you guys are okay there.
Mm-hmm.
As you are. So that's good. And then I have to ask, which we ask every guest, and I'm very curious about your answer here because we've spent this entire episode talking. We said at the start, you have been for a lengthy career a professional developer on things made by Apple. Okay.
Mhm.
That's your full-time gig.
Mhm.
And then you have a side gig that's not so small. I mean, this is a huge app and you have a full-on business surrounding it. And you're actually employing other people imminently to port it to Android. Okay.
Mhm.
So now I ask you, what do you do when you're away from the keyboard? And I'm thinking, are you ever away from the keyboard? I hope
Texas Hold'em.
sometimes. Okay, for real?
Yes, I play Texas Hold'em. I play poker with my spouse on a regular basis. Um, and admittedly, over the past couple of weeks, it's been I get out of my day job. I do a little bit of my side gig. I have dinner. I watch Jeopardy, and I fall asleep.
Yeah.
I'm not 20 anymore. I'm really not. Um,
It does change as you get older. My gosh,
but
I'm older than you, and yes, I hear you. And I
but
like those little routines.
back to normal for me would be being able to go to the casino and play in the poker room again.
Okay. All right. So you are into it. So you play at the tables but you're not doing that now because it's not comfortable
I
for
don't
your
want. I don't
family.
want to be passing chips around other people.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense.
No, that's definitely not clean.
Did you ever think about going pro with poker?
Oh God, no, no, I suck.
Okay. Okay.
I'm good enough for my group of friends. Sometimes
Right.
sometimes I win, sometimes I lose massively. I'm not going out to where I could lose like rent. No,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
I don't have
Okay.
a
I get
gambling
it.
problem.
Good.
So one of the things that we didn't discuss with the app is, say the app is successful, then what?
Right.
And honestly, I have ideas for other apps in my head.
Good. Okay. Good.
And
That
I'm
makes
hoping
sense.
that by the time this would ramp up to a point where I don't have to be the point person on it, I could say, okay, so here's the next app we're going to try to do.
Okay. So as you're talking, it's sounding like a full-on company
Yes.
with
Yes,
other people.
I hope that at some point I can say that I collect a salary from what I'm doing.
Yes. And then maybe you are employing somebody else to be
Mhm.
the junior dev who's bug fixing and handling support
I have an Android developer on staff, something like that.
Yes. Yes. And if you're earning a salary from this, that means you don't need to be earning a salary developing apps that are of less interest to you for somebody else.
Exactly.
So that is very much from your lips to God's ears made that happen. Yes, that would be amazing. And that does happen for some people.
Some people.
So yeah.
I can try.
Okay.
I'll go
Absolutely.
out in a blaze of fire trying.
Or just like a steady flame where this app is successful and it's still okay to be working the other gig. And maybe this becomes your main gig and a little bit of programming for other people as a side gig, like the focus changes.
We can hope.
So, and that the world feels safer and healthier. So you can sit around a poker table when that's fun for you to do so.
Yay.
Yeah. So, well, fantastic. Thank you for telling me all about this. It's inspiring. My limited ability to write Swift and Swift UI, I can't imagine being at this point, but I definitely see the wisdom of like the business plan side of it. That actually feels easier to me coming from the marketing and business side. Like I see the wisdom of doing that.
So basically I can hire you then when I
Yeah, maybe. You probably want to hire somebody from the community that knows about it, but yes.
Yeah, it's been an experience, and the experience has turned its first corner and is now onto its next major experience.
That's very exciting. And I wonder if next time you get to talk about this, you will talk, like, I know you're hiring an Android team. Will part of this be a jumping off place for you to learn some about Android development yourself, though?
I'll have to, because I'll have to learn how to manage this thing in the app in the Play Store.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we've got a book for that.
It's Ray Wenderlich. There's always a book for that.
Absolutely.
Oh.
So should we tell people what we've got coming up next?
Absolutely. This is, we always make the host and the co-host sit on the fiery chair for the last episodes of the season, per se. But of course, we are now entering into con season, or virtual con season. Both Google I/O and WWDC have announced that they will have virtual conferences. Though I think both have said that there is some form of specialized seating available.
At
Which
WW for the keynote, there's some you can
watch
listen
party.
to. Yeah, there's a in-person watch party in Cupertino. Yeah. And
Yeah,
I think we still
win
don't
the,
know how you get the ticket or how you get to be there.
I never win the lotteries, so
I was going to say, it suggests that you and I are not going to be at that watch party, but
no, but we will be at a live cast. And what we do is the evening of the Google I/O keynote and the evening of the WWDC keynote, we will get a series of experts from Android, a series of experts from iOS, and we will talk about all of the announcements that were made, whether or not they were good, bad, indifferent. There have been years that we have sat there going, well, that was underwhelming. And then there have been years where everything has been dumped on us in a bucket and we are just like, we have no idea where to look. I was at WWDC 19 when they introduced Swift UI and Combine. And there's a reason that all the icons around the convention were animals with their heads blowing open.
yes, I'm very curious what's coming for us this year in DubDub. So, and I'm looking forward to both these.
Oh, Google I/O has usually got tons and tons of toys because it's not just Android. It's
right.
Search and Google and Chrome and everything. So there's always a toy for everybody there. But that's going to wrap things up for this episode, this season. If you want to find Susanna online on Twitter, you can find her at Suz Gupta. That's SUZGUPTA. I am Podcast Drew, DRU, like it actually says down there. We will be back on Wednesday, May 11th. Keep an eye on the Ray Wenderlich site, and we will probably try to have an audio drop to tell you what's going on as far as the live casts are going. But until then, we'll see you in a couple of weeks with the live cast. And until then, we head back to the Emerald Castle. Ray, back to you.
And that's a wrap. Thanks again, everybody, for listening to the RayWenderlich.com podcast. We hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to leave a rating on iTunes. See you next time.